Good evening. It is October 1st, 2020. Welcome to episode 7 of Legacy Battle podcast on ngscsports.com. NGSC Sports, we never stop. We're sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to their website, arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience at your favorite sports venue. Arena Eats mobile app. You can pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? So please join the Legacy Battle Facebook group page and our YouTube channel. Our next podcast is October 16th at special start time of 9:30 p.m. because our guest lives on the West Coast. And it's going to be the greatest tennis rivalries. And we'll be joined by Wimbledon and French Open winner Jonathan Stark. You don't want to miss that one. Michael Adams, joined with me always, is Brian King, Brett Ebert, Kevin Adams. And tonight we are joined by a very special guest. He played tight end for 7 years with the Indianapolis Colts, 3 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was a member of the 1995 NFL All-Rookie Team, the 1999 All-Pro Team, a Pro Bowler in 2001, and of course in 2003 he won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's caught touchdown passes from Peyton Manning, Brad Johnson, Captain Comeback Jim Harbaugh. He's a graduate from the University of Illinois and has some firsthand knowledge about tonight's debate because he played against Penn State in 1994 in what was a really thrilling 35-31 score. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ken Dilger. So thank you, Ken, for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Totally excited to have you join in on tonight. So everybody, after the debate, we're going to ask a few questions to talk about Ken's career. Trivia question for a prize will be later in the show. And tonight's debate is who should have been the 1994 NCAA College Football National Champion, the Penn State Nittany Lions or the Nebraska Cornhuskers? So we're going to jump right into this. We're going to start with the offenses. Ken, we're going to come to you a lot today, but I'm going to start with Brett with the offense. Let's go Penn State first.
So we're talking about Penn State. All right, started off there. Well, I mean, what can you say? Penn State probably had one of the most prolific offenses that year. I mean, you look at it, you had two of their top guys go in the top 10 basically picks for the NFL draft that year. And, you know, they were looking and they were having an average margin of victory of around 26 points per win. That was actually one of the highest in the nation that year. And they were scoring 47, just a little over 47 points per game against the teams that they were playing. And I mean, again, some of their schedule, these were not cupcakes they were playing. These were teams who were supposed to be teams that were in the top 25. So, I mean, I'll start off with that and I'll pass it around so I don't talk about too many of the other points somebody might have.
Ken, you saw them live. What did you think? They came back. They were down quite a bit in your game, right?
Yeah, I think we had a halftime score. I think we were up 28-3 or 31-3, something like that. And the first half, our offense was just going crazy. And our defense, I think, was ranked at one point number one in the country that year. We had Simeon Rice, Kevin Hardy, both Butkus Award winners. I think Simeon was, Kevin was number 2. Dana Howard was the year before. And we had a great team offense. We had some firepower, nothing great, not like Penn State. But I'll tell you what, in that second half, we just couldn't stop them. John Carter, they just kept on coming at us.
They were definitely stacked. Mr. Penn State over there, Kevin, I'm sure you're going to keep your bias out of this today, but tell us your impression of Penn State offense.
I mean, hands down, they're arguably probably the best offense in the history of Penn State. Kerry Collins was a great quarterback. Went on, into the NFL and had a decent career. Bobby Ingram, great wide receiver, holds the record for most yards at Penn State. And then Ken had mentioned the running back Carter. I mean, those three right there. I mean, that's a pretty three-headed monster coming at you on offense. I mean, they had the number 1 ranked offense in the league that year. They scored over 100 points more total that year than Nebraska did. And they ranked first in points per game. They averaged 47 points per game. That
Right.
in itself, right there, I mean, they dominated on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, of course, they were 12-0. Kerry Collins, he led in yards per pass. He was 9th in touchdown passes, 3rd in completion percentage. He won the Davy O'Brien, the Maxwell, the Sammy Ball Awards. Totally took all the awards pretty much. Kajana Carter was 1st in yards per rush, 2nd in touchdowns, 4th in yards. And then you got not just Bobby Ingram, but Freddie Scott. Freddie Scott was 6th in yards per catch, 11th in TDs, and 11th in yards. And then Bobby Ingram was 14th in yards per reception and 9th in yards. And he won the Bolitnikoff Award that year. And they had 5 All-Americans on that offense. That's a pretty stacked team. Brian, what do you think?
One thing that really stands out, I mean, you talked about the quarterback, Collins. Also, Wally Richardson, he eventually went on to the NFL. He was backup quarterback. And then you had 4 really standout running backs who all eventually made it to the NFL, with Kajana Carter, John Whitman, who eventually was a fullback with the Steelers, Mike Archie, and Brian Milne. So, that backfield was just totally stacked. And, it was kind of a pick your poison thing, like you said, because you had Bobby Ingram and you had Freddie Scott. And then you had Kyle Brady, a very good tight end. He could block well and he could receive. And then you had Jeff Hardings on the line, who eventually became a Pro Bowl offensive lineman in the NFL. So on that side of the ball, I mean, you really couldn't find a weakness. They were going to be able to do pretty much what they wanted to against you. If you tried to key on one certain aspect of their game, they weren't going to flinch, because they had so many ways that they could beat you.
I did a little research. The entire starting offense from that 1994 Penn State team made it to the NFL, and that includes the 3rd wide receiver and the backup running back and the kicker. That is outstanding. And Ken, I got to ask you about that 3rd wide receiver, because I'm pretty sure you won a Super Bowl with him, Joe Jaravicius. Was the guy had hands? What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, Joe was a great teammate of mine in Tampa Bay, and I loved being around him because he was so competitive. I don't know if you guys remember that game in 2003, the first game of the season in Philadelphia, when they opened up Lincoln Financial Field, and he scored a touchdown by tipping the ball to himself and catching in the corner of the end zone. So, I don't remember Joe that much at Penn State when we were playing him there, but he was a great wide receiver at Penn State and in the pros.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Nebraska. Their offense, they were 13-0, of course, that year. Brian, we'll start with you. Give us your impressions of them.
Well, it starts off with Tommy Frazier. He ended up being the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy the following season. But he did deal with injuries during the season that we're talking about. But while he was in there, he was very, very good. He was able to run the ball. He averaged over 60 rushing yards per game. He had 6 touchdowns in just 4 games, and some of those appearances were abbreviated because of the blood clot that he had. So just starting off with him, he was really good. And then while he was down, Brooke Behringer, he was adequate to run the offense as well. He was able to really, they didn't have the running aspect as much as they had, but man, he could stand there in a pocket and he could still run the offense and still get things done.
Brett?
Well, I mean, piggybacking off of that, then you move down the line and you talk about Lawrence Phillips, the running back. I mean, had a massive year that year, averaged, over 6 yards per carry. I think he had something along the lines of like over 1,700 yards rushing. I mean, it was just an amazing year for him. And so, again, they dealt with some of those injuries at quarterback, but they had some guys who really stepped up and helped to really move that team forward that year. Again, you talk about depth. We were just talking about Penn State's depth, and that's something Nebraska had all the way down the line when you look at all the different guys that contributed that year.
And Ken, I know you didn't play against them, but I'm sure you were always keeping an eye on what was going on back then. So, what anything about that offensive line? I mean, that was one of the best offensive lines in college football history, really.
Yeah, I know that they love to run the option, and watching Lawrence Phillips run out of the backfield and Tommy Frazier, I mean, what they did on offense at they averaged 340 rushing that year. So yeah, it was crazy. Nobody could stop him. It was fun to watch. It's a different offense. I think most people in the Big Ten kind of ran the pro style offense, but these guys kind of ran that wishbone. And when Behringer was in there, he threw the ball a little bit more, but still he was more than adequate. He was very athletic, threw the ball well, and they didn't throw the ball very much, but when he did a good job at it. So, but I think what stands out on that Nebraska team was their defense.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say the same thing about not throwing the ball much. So between Brooks Behringer and Tommy Frazier, they only had 14 touchdown passes combined and only 1,600 yards thrown. So it was definitely a very one-dimensional offense. I know you mentioned Lawrence Phillips. He was 12th in yards per rush, 4th in touchdowns, 3rd in yards. But then if you go to their wide receivers, just to really throw it how little they threw the ball, their leading wide receiver only had 23 receptions. So, I mean, that's and only 360 yards. That's kind of crazy. I mean, especially today in pass-happy college football and pass-happy NFL. But that was just an amazing stat. And let's see, they had a guard, Zach Wiegert. He won the John Outland Trophy, and they had 3 All-Americans on their team on the offense. So very one-dimensional offense. But all in all, I would say that Penn State definitely had the better offense. We're talking 564 points for to 459 points for Nebraska. So let's move to the defense. Kevin, we'll start with you. I'll let you start with Penn State. Go ahead.
Well, Penn State's defense wasn't one of the better parts of their team that year. Their defense was ranked number 70th country. That's not very good. That just kind of shows you, though, how much the defense depended on the offense. Compared to Nebraska, Nebraska was a top 5 team, but Penn State's defense wasn't very good. I mean, they did have some players get drafted and everything, but they let up a lot of points. They let up 21 points per game. They were ranked 30th points per game and let up 252 total points for the season. They were ranked 30th for points per game. They were ranked 70th overall.
I have 107. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that Nebraska, if they did not end up playing, Nebraska's offense would have ran all over the defense.
Ken, you played against this defense. Obviously wasn't one of Penn State's best. Was there anyone that stood out that you guys were game planning for or anything at that time?
Not really, but that was one of my better games in my college career and in that my senior year where I caught 48 catches. Their secondary wasn't great. We moved the ball down the field and threw the ball down the field. Their linebacking core was average. Their secondary wasn't great as well. So we got the ball down the field. I can't remember how much rushing yards we got to that game, but we were able to throw the ball pretty good on them that game.
If you YouTube your name, there's actually a video of all your plays against Penn State. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's the only game where they highlighted every play. It was the one against Penn State. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But Brett, go ahead.
Well, they
You went on mute, Brett.
Sorry, yeah, I clicked the wrong thing there. There we go. They touched on it already. A lot of the points. I mean, you know that it was probably the most suspect part of the team for Penn State was their defense. I mean, I think they were averaging giving up about 21 points a game, which was not that great. Kevin kind of mentioned that, and there just wasn't many standout players that you can really pick or pinpoint for that team. It was just their offense. Their offense tried to steamroll everybody, and again, pretty much did a good job of that.
All right, Brian, we'll let you start with Nebraska on defense.
Oh, okay. Nebraska's defense. Okay. got to switch my notes around now. Okay, well, Nebraska's defense was better than Penn State's, definitely. There was a ranking that I found that has to do with the point differential and taking also into account the strength of schedule. And Nebraska's defense ended up ranking fifth overall in the country in that metric. So it was a pretty solid defense, and they had a guy named Baron Miles in the secondary who he picked off 5 passes, and he was that ended up being like the 6th highest total in the country that season. So they were pretty good. I also think that they kind of benefited from the Nebraska's offensive philosophy, the way that Nebraska really controlled the ball with the running game and controlled the time of possession, and then that made it really a little bit easier because that defense was playing with leads pretty often too. So it made it a little bit easier. But when the chips were down, they were able to get it done.
And they had 2 All-Americans on defense. Penn State had none. They had more turnovers than Penn State's defense. The plus minus, I'm pretty sure they blew Penn State out on the plus minus. But Ken, were you able to watch the championship game that year with Nebraska versus Miami?
Yeah, of course I did. I looked at both sides of the ball. Miami had a ton of talent on that team too. It was a beast for them. Stacked talent. What sticks out for that Miami team is they beat a really good Florida State team that year. So I think Nebraska maybe had a little bit tougher schedule by who they played and who those guys beat as their opponents.
Right. Kevin, you got anything you want to add on Nebraska's defense?
Yeah, I mean, one of the stats that jumps out to me is 10 out of their, 13 opponents that season, 17 points or less. And that was number 3 ranked Miami, number 2 ranked Colorado, number 16 ranked Kansas State, number 13 UCLA is one of the only teams that was actually ranked that put up more than 17 on them. And then the other 2 teams, which I'm very shocked by this though, Pacific California put up 21 against them, and Wyoming put up 32. But they shut out number 24 West Virginia. I mean, they held 4 top 25 teams to 17 points or less. That's pretty impressive. I'll give them that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can say they beat a lot of good teams. We'll get into the schedule here in a little bit. UCLA being 13. I think they finished the year 3-7 or something. So what you start at ranked isn't necessarily where you end ranked. But Brett, we'll let you start out with we'll go into the special teams, and if anybody thinks there's a coaching advantage, because we're talking about 2 Hall of Fame coaches here, then you can bring that up too.
Well, that's actually, I was going to jump into the coach thing because that's what I kind of have a little bit more about. I mean, what can you say? 2 Hall of Fame coaches. I mean, multiple national championships for both of them, both in the College Football Hall of Fame. Both something, kind of rare. They stay with teams for a long time. This day and age, you see coaches get turned about in 3 years if they don't perform, different types of things like that. But I mean, when you look at it, you have 2 different types of mind. You have the Tom Osborne, who was very along the defensive mind, and Coach Paterno, which they had some good defenses here and there, but it was the offense that really got them through that year.
Right. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my senior year, man, at Penn State. I just finished a final, and I was outside on the phone with my mom, talking to her, telling her how the test went. And Joe Paterno comes walking up the sidewalk towards me, and it was right after Penn State had beat Florida State in the Orange Bowl, and I got a few minutes to talk to Paterno about that game and just chit chat for a little bit. I mean, hands down, that guy is the best coach ever to walk the college football grounds. I mean, he's got over 400 wins. He's got the 2 national titles. He should have had more. don't really know much about Tom Osborne. I mean, yeah, I know he has 3 titles over Joe Paterno. And, I mean, he obviously had great teams. He's won the Big 8 12 times, if I'm not mistaken. Big 12 once. Got Bobby Dodd Coach of the Year, ESPN Coach of the Decade. I mean, they're both 2 great coaches. Paterno coached a lot longer, though, so obviously he's going to have more wins and stuff. But, I mean, hands down, both of them are great coaches. Can't really pick a better one between the 2.
Brian, you got any special teams stats or anything for us?
I mean, you kind of touched on earlier about Brett Conway. Being an All-American, going to the NFL, as a kicker, and he was ranked. What I have here, he was ranked 7th overall in field goal percentage that season in the nation. So, yeah, Brett Conway could come through. Also notable special teams thing maybe people don't know about. That year, the guy who was doing some of the punting was actually Joe Jurevicius for Penn State. So, Mr. Dilger's, future teammate there was actually punting the ball. So we had that. As far as the coaching, real quick, I took a look and at a couple of very reputable sources. You had ESPN. They did their 150th anniversary list for coaches, and then also I looked at Bleacher Report. They did an all-time list. And in both cases, they had Tom Osborne ahead. The 150th anniversary had Osborne at number 4, Joe Paterno at number 7, and the Bleacher Report had Osborne at 3 and Joe Paterno at 4. But, I mean, they're very equal, both legends for sure. We'll get into more later about the adversity that each one faced during this particular season. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a toss-up when it comes to these 2 coaches.
On the special teams, I'll just throw this in. Conway was 62 for 63 on extra points that year and 10 for 12 on field goals. We move over to Nebraska. Most of their kicking was done by Tom Sealer. He was 40 for 42 on the extra points, so pretty close. 4 for 6 on the field goals. But their other field goal kicker, Erhad, if you combine that, they were only 7 for 14 on field goals that year. So it's a good thing they weren't in a lot of close games. That really could have come back to haunt them. But Ken, I got to ask you, 2 Hall of Fame coaches, is there an advantage to one of them, or are they just pretty much in a dead heat?
I think it's got to be a dead heat. I think both of them played in different conferences, different style of offenses. Penn State always had that drop back quarterback, like you saw with what they had, Kerry Collins. Penn State kind of hung their hat on the option. I think they had different athletes and different style of game, but I think both styles, no matter what you agree with, whether you like it or not, they both won. They both won, big, some big games, in the history of college football. So, I was never a big fan of the option offense, but just growing up in Big Ten country, you always watch the pro styles from all across the Big Ten and the quarterbacks from Harbaugh to, Brady and all those great guys there. So I was always a big fan of the pro style in the game there, but, both had great success.
Absolutely. Just one last note on the special teams. We talked more about the coaches. Penn State, they had Mike Archie. He was averaging 21.8 yards on kick returns and 11.5 on punt returns. And then you got Damian Benning over at Nebraska. He was averaging 25.7 on kick returns. And then Kareem Moss was doing the punt returns at 7.5. So that's kind of a split on that as far as the returns go. But all right, so before we move into the schedule, I just need to remind everybody to check out Arena Eats. Log on to their website, arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience at your favorite sports venue. Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? All right, so let's move on to, I know we talked about it a little bit already, the competition for each team. Brett, how about Penn State? What do you got on their competition?
Well, I mean, you could argue that by the end of the season or so, that Penn State had a little bit more difficult schedule, even though when you look at it, Penn State only played 4 top 25 teams at the time that the schedule came out. Again, it all, like you said, depends on where the team ends than where you begin the season. But again, when you look at their schedule and then you look at their average margin of victory and things like that, you can say no matter who they played, they handled their business and what they had to do. Again, they had USC, they had at Michigan, which was a massive game. They had Ohio State, obviously, and then, number 12 Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And what can you say? They handled their closest game actually was against Illinois. Interestingly enough, that was the only game where they didn't win by at least 7 points. So, that's looking at their schedule.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, just to touch a little bit more on that, like the overall rankings of their schedule, Penn State was actually ranked eighth toughest schedule that year, and Nebraska was ranked 40th. And you touched on the margin of victory. Penn State does have a better margin of victory against their opponents that year, and also the conference strength too. The Big Ten that year was actually the first ranked conference, and the Big Eight was actually ranked 4th for conference strength. So I mean, Penn State, yeah, they might not have played as many ranked teams, but doesn't mean that the other teams that they faced weren't decent or weren't good. They still played overall a lot more better teams and a tougher schedule that year than Nebraska did, and by a good margin, 8th to 40th.
Ken, you lived the Big Ten that year. What was that like? What teams were you guys looking like this is going to be really hard to play against?
Looking at the schedules for Penn State, that year I thought the whole Big Ten conference as a whole was down. Penn State beat Ohio State team that went 9-4, I think, and we beat Ohio State again and had a close game versus Michigan. So, from top to bottom, Big Ten only had 3 ranked teams and kind of blew everybody out. Michigan State wasn't very good that year either. So it's kind of shocked me when I heard you guys' stats about the Big Ten number 1 conference strength in conference compared to the Big 8. But you still got to win close games, and Penn State did that very well. They blew a lot of good teams out, but I wouldn't call a lot of the Big Ten games that year great teams that year.
The win percentage for the teams that Penn State played that year was .518, so that's not too bad. Nebraska's was only .510, so Penn State did have a little bit harder of a schedule. Brian, why don't you dig into Nebraska's schedule there for us?
Okay, well, Nebraska, they started off with they had the kickoff classic against West Virginia. West Virginia team eventually played in the bowl game, and they shut them out 31-0. So that was a really good one there. They ended up playing really 7 teams if you count Miami. 7 teams that played in bowl games that year. So you had West Virginia, you had Texas Tech, you had Kansas State, Colorado, you had Oklahoma, and then of course you had Miami. So their competition was pretty tough. I especially want to circle and highlight the Colorado game, because the Colorado game, they go against Rashawn Salaam, who ended up being a Heisman Trophy winner. They were able to handle him. They only allowed 7 points in the game. This is a team that ended up being number 3 overall. They won Fiesta Bowl. And, they also had, an All-American with Westbrook on that team too. So, they were, and Cordell Stewart was a very good quarterback. So they were able to, to rise above some pretty significant competition.
A lot of Pittsburgh fans might disagree with you on that Cordell Stewart comment, but 3 of us are from Pittsburgh originally. So it's amazing you brought up Rashawn Salaam. That is the 3 top running backs pretty much that year. You got Salaam, Kajana Carter, and Lawrence Phillips. None of them really did a lot in the NFL. That's very surprising to see that. I forgot all about Salaam. I'm getting old.
Yes, he actually just passed away here about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago.
I heard that. Okay. Ken, anything you want to say about Nebraska?
I thought their schedule was solid. It wasn't great. Like I said, the Big 8 that year wasn't great, but what they what they did versus a very good Colorado team. I watched that team all season long just because they were always on the later games after our games. Seems like Illinois games were always on at noon Eastern time, 11 o'clock Central. So you had a lot of time to sit back and watch some of those games. And some of my guys at the Colts were from Colorado and Penn State and even Nebraska too. So get to kind of see what their background was. But, what Nebraska did versus Colorado and Miami were probably the two things that kind of stuck out with me.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the 95 draft. Ken, you were drafted in 95, correct?
Correct.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah. Kevin, Penn State 95 draft. What do you got on that?
Well, I know they had 5 players drafted that year. Most notably, Kerry Collins. I don't think he really. I mean, he performed in the NFL. I wouldn't say that he had a great career in the NFL.
Went to the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, but did he win it?
Took Carolina, an expansion team, to a championship game. I'd say it was a good career, but
Yeah, I mean they had the 5 that got drafted, like you had mentioned, that were, I believe they all 5 were All Americans. Carter got drafted, Kyle Brady, Bill Cody, and Bill Geishauser. I don't know how to pronounce that, but he was drafted to the Colts. Was he drafted with you, Ken? Brian? He was a linebacker?
Yeah, Gail Hauser. He's
Yeah.
kind of like a 5th or 6th round. I think he maybe lasted a year or two on special teams, but didn't do much afterwards.
Right. So, I mean, really, Carrie Collins was the most successful out of the 5 that got drafted. And, like you said, he did go to the Super Bowl, but none of them were really successful and, really did anything in the NFL.
Well, I totally disagree with that, but I'm going to let some other people make their points first. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, just to touch on Kevin's point, the thing that was surprising with it too, when you look at Penn State and where they finished with those 5 that were drafted, again, I mentioned it kind of earlier, that you had 3 of them that were chosen within the top 10 picks of the draft that year, which that's just almost unheard of from a single team. So that's another thing that kind of you can debate with what we're debating tonight about the legacy of the 94 and who should be the champion. And again, 2 of those top 10s, they were both Heisman Trophy finalists. Again, another unusual thing that you don't really see nowadays, 2 players from the same team being up there and being finalists.
Not only that, they had 3 in the top 15. And Bobby Ingram had a very good career.
He wasn't drafted in 95.
Oh, that's true. Good point. Good point. All right. Yeah, you got me on that. All right. Well, he was on the team, though, so there you go. But, okay. Brian, tell us about Nebraska's side.
The story starts with with Lawrence Phillips, and and that was really a tragic story because he really had a lot of off the field problems. But when he first came out, he was thought very highly of. He was thought so highly of the Rams that they dealt Jerome Bettis to the Steelers on draft day, in order to make room for Phillips. So, they really thought that he was going to be, a guy to build their entire franchise around.
That changed history. Wow.
It really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's any LA Rams out there, hey, thanks. But, but still, like I said, he was thought that, he was, they really felt he could be a building block for that team. And that just goes to show, the level of admiration he had at that point.
And I think to truly judge a championship caliber team, you gotta look more when it comes to college teams. You gotta look more than just the '95 draft, because you're talking about guys that were drafted a few years beyond. So with Penn State, you got 5 players drafted in '95, 10 players in '96, and 3 players in '97. And 7 of those total were first or second rounders. And those were all people that were playing on the championship team. And then you move over to the Nebraska side. In 95, they had 7 players drafted, no first rounders. They had 6 players drafted in 96 and 8 players drafted in 97. So they basically had 21 players total to Penn State's 18. However, they only had 5 first or second rounders drafted. So Penn State had the higher drafted players out of that.
Can I add another quick point? Sorry,
yeah,
just to build off yours there. I was just going to say there were actually a total of 29 players that played on that 1994 Nebraska team that ended up playing in the NFL at some point. So just another good stat there.
Ken, you went. You were 95 draft. Was it the
Correct. Second round.
Second round. Oh wow. Okay, I thought Kevin said 5th earlier. All right. No. Good for you. And you went directly to the Colts, which very good team there. But can you give like a little bit of your experience there at that draft? Watching players go off the board. Was there any surprises to you?
I was surprised that Kyle Brady went as high as he did to the Jets, 10th overall. There was myself, Kyle Brady from Penn State, Christian Fourier from Colorado, Mark Bruner from Washington, all kind of in that same spot, mid first to early second, whatever. And Kyle went first, and I think Bruner went late first to Pittsburgh, then Fourier went early second to Seattle, then I went mid second to Indianapolis. But we were all ranked about the same. It's just Kyle was a big guy. He was 6'6", 265. Going into the New York City and playing there, those fans were brutal. The teams weren't very good, and they kind of roasted him for dropping a lot of balls. But I think he finally did something down in Jacksonville a little bit better than what he did in the Jets. But I think that year as a tight end, I think Mark Bruner was the best blocking tight end. I was kind of a hybrid, same with Christian Fourier. But that class all had 4 or 5 really good tight ends. But I was looking at Carrie Collins. He played 17 years in the league, as a quarterback. Yeah, you bounce around just because you're trying to fit the offensive scheme. But, he ended his last year in 2011 with the Colts and started 3 games when Peyton went down. So, a lot of teams out there thought highly of him. He had a weird throwing motion, kind of a slow throwing motion, but still he was very effective. And, to the last 17 years, hats off to him.
Took 3 different teams to the NFL playoffs. That says a lot to me. Carolina, the Giants, and Tennessee. I believe they were still Tennessee at that point. So, yeah. Good. Okay. So before we all give our pick of who we feel should have won, we're going to throw out our trivia question. So prior winners, you guys are still ineligible. Sorry about that. You got to be a member of the Legacy Battle Facebook group to win. So please join the Facebook group. Tonight's prize is a Brian Leach rookie card. You don't know who that is? New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup MVP. Everybody thinks it was Mark Messier. No, it was Brian Leach. So here's your question. You got to, as always, answer all parts of the question. Put it in the comments section. In the movie Space Jam, what score did Michael Jordan get on the golf hole he was sucked down by Bugs Bunny? And what score did Bill Murray and Larry Bird give themselves? And what was the reason they gave it to themselves? So just throw your answers in that comment section, and we'll get the prize mailed out to you, whoever gets all 3 of those. Ken, I know that sounds like a weird question, but we always make them entertainment sports based. So.
I saw the movie, but I can't remember any of those.
Yeah. So there's a remake coming out with LeBron. So.
Oh, fun.
All right. Brett, you're in the top corner. So who are you going with and why? Penn State or Nebraska?
Okay. Well, to dig into a little of the controversy real quick that year, I think it was all about the Bowl Coalition. The reason that Penn State didn't even have the opportunity to really be considered a champion is because the Rose Bowl always placed the Big Ten winner against the Pac-12 conference winner, and they didn't even get considered the Rose Bowl as part of the bowls that the champion could play in. Another part that's interesting about this year is, with Penn State, they if they would have been a little bit more flashy, because Joe Paterno, being the quality coach he was, didn't try to always run up the score. There were many games where he actually sat his starters in the fourth quarter because they already had a big lead. And a specific game that stands out, and why this is interesting, is the game against Indiana. He called off, the Dogs against Indiana, and the score ended up being way closer than it should have been at the end because the starters weren't in. And the polls that week specifically, because a lot of the pollsters who vote don't watch all the games necessarily, transferred 6 first-place votes to Nebraska simply because of how close the score was. And it was confirmed that a couple of those people who voted didn't even watch the game. They just looked at the final score. So I just had to add that in because those points were kind of interesting to me. But once everything's all said and done, when you look at the legacy, when you look at the stats, when you look at the players that were drafted, the Heisman finalists, anything you want to look at, I have to go with Penn State tonight. Okay. I think they should have been national champion.
Kevin, I'd come to you next, but I probably know where you're going. So let's go to Brian next.
When you look at the stories of each of these seasons, Penn State pretty much rolled, through their season without too much adversity, really. I mean, there was a few things here and there, but for the most part, they pretty much rolled through. When I look at Nebraska, I think of, okay, they were rolling too, and then Tommy Frazier goes down. The most important part of their offense. He goes down in after the third game, and then now, you would think, oh, maybe this season's ruined. We got to go to the backup quarterback. What's going to happen? And they even had to change the nuances of their offense a bit, for the next guy. And so they didn't really miss a beat. I mean, they had a bit of a hiccup against Wyoming. That game was a little closer than it should have been. And then after that, they end up with 6 games that they give up, single digits. And then, of course, when they get Miami, the big story was about, Nebraska not really being able to close the deal. They had lost to Miami the season before. And, they get Miami, I know the whole Bowl Coalition thing, but you can't control who you're playing, and they beat who was necessary for them to beat, whoever was on their schedule, they beat them. They did what they had to do. And I don't see any reason why that they shouldn't be the national champions.
Okay. Kevin.
So, Penn State, they had 7 total undefeated seasons up to that point, and have basically gotten snubbed all but 2 of those seasons. And one was in 1912, before any of the people that were voting then, and the other one was in 1986. They were new to the Big Ten. Nobody liked them in the Big Ten. Nobody wanted them in the Big Ten. If you look at the map of the voting, majority of the Big Ten conference, they didn't even vote for Penn State. You would think that the Big Ten area would vote for a team that's in their conference to show, like, hey, this is our conference, this is how good we are. But no, they didn't. All 4 votes from Ohio voted against Penn State and voted for Nebraska. Nebraska ended up winning the voting, like 51.5 first-place votes to Penn State's 10.5 first-place votes. It just wasn't in the cards that year for Penn State. Many speculated that this could have played a role in snubbing Joe Paterno of his final undefeated squad at the championship at that point. A lot of people said, Joe Paterno already had 2, Tom didn't have any yet, so they kind of did a pity vote for him. Penn State's defense was weak, but their offense was too much to handle. And if going into the finals and that at the end of the season, Nebraska didn't have their star quarterback or anything, I don't think their offense would have made that big of a difference to overcome Penn State's offense to beat Penn State. So I am going with my alma mater, Penn State.
Oh, there's the biggest shock in 7 episodes. You picking Penn State. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm going to go next, and Ken, the pressure's going to be on you because I'm going Nebraska, and here's why. Okay, Penn State had a miraculous year, maybe the best year they've ever had in college football history. But to judge a team, I look at it, what did they do the year prior and the year after? Well, that tells me how good every player was. So the previous year, Penn State was 10-2. And the year before, they went 12-0. They were 10-2. And then the year after, they were 9-3. And if I go over to Nebraska, the year before, they're 11-1. And then the year after, they're undefeated again at 12-0. So I feel like their depth just was much, much greater. And their offensive rank the season before was 7th and their defense 3rd, where Penn State was 17th and 22nd the year before. And then the year after, Nebraska's offense is ranked 1st and defense 4th. And Penn State drops to 13 and 41. So it was really just kind of a, I don't want to say blip in the radar for Penn State for 1 year where everything kind of came together perfectly. It was a perfect season. But I'm just not sure that they had all the depth that Nebraska had. So I'm going with Nebraska because of that. So, Ken, it's on you.
Talk about pressure. Taking a look at both teams. Playing the Big Ten that year, played a lot of the same teams that Penn State played. In my mind, the Big Ten wasn't a dominant conference that year. Michigan was 9-4. Ohio State was 9-4. We beat Ohio State that year, and we came very close to beating Michigan. Lost to them 19-14. Take a look at what Nebraska did. I think two games kind of stand out along the way in their undefeated season was the Colorado win. They had tons of talent, and the Miami win in the bowl game. Miami beat a very good Florida State team that year as well. A lot of my teammates from Tampa were from Florida and Miami, and I think out of those teams, probably had 3 or 4 Hall of Famers from Tampa. So I love the Big Ten, but I think defense wins championships, and I think I give the edge to Nebraska that year.
There you have it. Nothing changes. It's still Nebraska. All right. Very good. Well, we have a little time left. We're going to do a Q&A with Ken. He's going to be kind enough to answer the hard career questions. No, we're very laid back. So, Brett, you can give your question. Go ahead.
All right. Going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here, but I wanted to ask you, who was one of your favorite teammates in the NFL that you ever played with?
Boy, that's tough. In Indianapolis, you kind of went through kind of a transition. First 2 or 3 years there, it's kind of an older group with Harbaugh, Marshall Faulk, a lot of older guys. Will Wolford was on that team as well. Kirk Loudermilk from went to Ohio State, and then Peyton comes in '97. Kind of at 3 years into the league, or 4 years in with him, I was kind of one of the older guys on that Colts team. So, from that Colts team, I still have a lot of friends. Adam Meadows, still talk to Peyton, and so forth. And going down to Tampa, I was kind of coming in as an older guy to helping out the offense, but there's so many great guys down there. Like you said, Joe Jurevicius, he was my roommate on the road that year. We won the Super Bowl, and I don't know if you guys remember this. He was dealing with a child that was born with some very rare disease. I think it ended up passing away about 2 months later in mid-January, December after the Super Bowl. And I remember that he was kind of worn out from traveling and dealing with that situation. But, Joe stands out. Brad Johnson stands out. We do some Zoom calls every now and then. Those guys get on. Mike Allstott was a good friend of mine down there as well. And so those are kind of guys that kind of stand out in both teams.
All right. Thank you.
And I had posted on our group page the YouTube video of your touchdown pass to Marvin Harrison.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, I know you played quarterback in high school. Who told you, how did that come about that all of a sudden you're in college and you're a tight end? How did that come about? And how was the adjustment?
So I grew up in southern Indiana in a very small town of about 300 people. And so my high school was consolidated. So there's probably 12 or 13 small towns in a consolidated high school. And we were very competitive in all sports. And Jay Cutler went to my high school as well years ago. And so I grew into be 6'5", 215. And back then we didn't have a weight program. We had very little weights and running in the summertime, maybe a couple of days a week, nothing like they have now. You know, I played 3 sports, football, basketball, and baseball. And so I kind of grew into the position, played, running back and quarterback ever since the 6th grade and just kind of, fell in love with it. And so when I was being recruited, it was mostly the MAC schools. Not many people went down to the southwest corner of the state. And so when John Makovic went to Illinois, University of Evansville had just disbanded their football team, and their head coach went to Illinois as recruiting coordinator, and his name was Randy Rogers. And so he wanted to get some kids from the southwest portion of the state because it's only a 3 or 3.5 hour drive to Champaign. So I went there because that was the only Big Ten offer I had. Kevin Hardy went there, had a great career, and some other kids who kind of bounced around Illinois as well. So, and so in college, I just kind of started growing, started filling out, started gaining 10, 15 pounds that first semester. And when I went there, Jeff George had just left. So there was 2 senior quarterbacks coming in, or junior quarterbacks, Jason Verduzco and Jeff Kinney. And that senior year, when I was there as a freshman, they had 2 senior tight ends, Jeff Finke and Frank Hartley. And after they had gone, there was only 2 freshman tight ends. So I felt I just wanted to play no matter what position. And I just felt that it was easier for me to switch to tight end and play earlier than sit behind 2 other quarterbacks who were going to be juniors at the time and play a lot earlier than what I imagined.
It worked out well.
It really did.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you kind of touched base on what I was going to ask you a little bit. I was going to ask you kind of how did you end up going to Illinois, and what were some of the other schools that gave you offers?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the MAC schools, Ball State. I think I came down between Illinois, Ball State, Indiana State. I did take a visit to Morehead State in the summertime. Toledo, Miami of Ohio wanted me to come visit, but at that point, I knew I just wanted to stay close to home, and I came down between Ball State and Illinois, and I just felt that if I was going to make a chance or take a chance to play in college, why not go to the Big Ten, get a scholarship, and at least get a really good education.
Brian.
First off, Ken, I just want to say, hey, thanks for coming on to the show. This is really awesome to be able to talk to you. My question for you is, you were NFL tight end for 10 years. With that position, when you're receiving, you have linebackers covering you have safeties, a variety of different defensive players can scheme against you. Which players that you lined up against really stand out as like the toughest competition that you ever had?
Well, I got to go back to the old school AFC East when we were playing Buffalo and the Jets and Miami, New England. Going into all those stadiums was just hard, and Buffalo they all had great defenses. I mean, going against one of the guys that I always kind of measure myself against as a blocker was Bryce Paup from Buffalo. Kind of a nobody really knew about him. I think he came out of South Dakota or North Dakota and had a great career at Buffalo. But all those outside linebackers in the AFC East, Roman Pfeiffer, Jason Taylor in Miami, Bruce, then all the names are still there. So all the AFC East guys were tough, and I was always a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end. But so I loved to block, and the safeties in the AFC East were tough as well. But Ty Law from New England kind of stands out as well. So The whole AFC East was just an old great conference. We've battled many. I think we took New England, or no, we took Buffalo. We beat them on a Monday Night Football 10-6. So that was just kind of the black and blue division from the old school that we did years ago. But Buffalo, Bryce Pop, Phil Hansen was another defensive end that always gave me fits, and it was always a great time to block those guys.
Do you have time for a few more, or do you got to go?
Go ahead.
Oh, great. Give me your high-low from your NFL time.
Oh God, the high was probably winning the Super Bowl. That year was so much fun. Wins in Philadelphia, taking that stadium down. They were throwing batteries and everything else at you. Going into San Diego and beating the Raiders on one of those epic games that the defense scored 3 or 4 touchdowns. The low, I'm sure you Pittsburgh fans remember this, was the 95 playoff game when we had chances to win, and Cordell Stewart catches that touchdown when he stepped out of bounds, and we had a couple chances when Quentin Cormier dropped that pass, and Cornell Lake comes off the backside and trips our running back. So that was probably the low, one of the lows. 3-13 a couple times. That would have been probably 97, the last year of Harbaugh, and then 98, Peyton's year, was also 3-13. So, but there's a lot of great memories, a lot of great guys. Playing in the league for 10 years, 160 games, you always have a lot of ups and downs.
You guys want to throw one more each? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Okay, yeah, I'll just being a Tampa boy, I gotta at least ask something about the team. What was it like being a player under John Gruden?
It was fun. Didn't know much about John. In the off season of 2002, I had gotten released by Indy. Dungy got fired by Tampa, and we just kind of switched jobs. Gruden, met him at the downtown Hooters in Indianapolis at the Combine, and I think it was in the paper the next day that we met at Hooters, and I was looking to sign with Tampa Bay. But, John was fun. Great passion for the game. Back then, he was only like 38 or 39 years old, and everybody asked me about, what was he like off the field, and I'm like, he's exactly what he is off the field as he is on the field. In the meeting rooms, he's got great history of the game. He loves the history of the game, whether it's a coach or whether it's a wide receiver he coached in Green Bay or San Francisco, and so forth. And he's exactly the same. He's got great passion and just loves the game. And I think you saw that on what he did on Monday Night Football for all those years.
Brian, go ahead.
Okay, well, you were in the huddle with Peyton Manning in his early years in the NFL. Can you tell us what it was like to be working with him as a young guy? I mean, we kind of all know how he turned out, but can you just kind of tell us how he was in his early years?
I think it was exactly the same way he was as his older years. We'd come off a 3-13 season, and we get the first pick overall, and everybody kind of expected Peyton to come in, and we drafted him. And even if early on you have the on the field activity days, the OTA days in the spring after the draft, and you can tell early on that he demanded a presence in the huddle, and you can tell at an early age that he wanted everybody to do what he wanted and to be as good as him. And it took us a year to kind of get through some things with him and the new offense with Tom Moore, but we went from 3-13 to 13-3 in just a year, and Peyton was a big part of that, and he worked hard, and he made us work hard, made us got better, and I think you saw that with what he and Marvin Harrison did throughout the 5 or 6 years together.
Kevin, you have one more?
Yeah. If there was one player that you could have played with that you didn't get to, who would that player be outside of the teams you played on?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me that before.
Don't say Brady. We'll all be really mad.
But I did take a visit to New England after they won that 2001 Super Bowl, and they had just won. He was in the weight room working out, and he wasn't the guy he was now, as sophisticated. He was a scrawny little kid. I think he was probably maybe 24 years old back then. But so I did meet Tom, but probably some of the quarterbacks. I think it would have been great to play with like a Troy Aikman. Somebody like that kind of does it the right way. I love watching him on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, wherever Fox has now. And, I got to talk to him a couple of times when they did the Fox games down in Tampa, and he seems like a great guy. But, there's so many great players out there that you never get a chance to play, but you play against. Watching Barry Sanders run probably would have been a great thrill to block for him. Guys like that, they just kind of stand out, that are great players, but also great guys.
Ken, do you have anything you want to plug?
I know you guys are down in Florida, but I do the Colts pregame show on Wish TV here in Indianapolis. Been doing that for 13 years. We're live Sunday mornings from 11 to 12. We do a great job, and the host, Anthony Calhoun, has won a couple of Emmys of what we've done. Big awards for them, so it's a great show. And the Colts are in a different league than the Buccaneers, but maybe someday they'll be in the Super Bowl together, and wouldn't that be fun?
That would be. Well, I want to give you a personal thank you, because you don't even know this, but in 1997, you were part of my fantasy football winning team. Now, it could have been because Barry Sanders went for 2,000 yards that year and he was on my team, but you were a part of it. So,
well, hey, the story about that in 2001, I go to Tampa, and I'm walking to the lobby, and somebody yells out to me, "Hey, Dilger, that touchdown you threw in the Jets game won my fantasy league for me." So you get those things that kind of just make you kind of, oh, okay, great. So that was fun.
Do you play fantasy?
I've picked it up the last couple of years. My son is 18, and the last couple of years we've gotten into a couple leagues. Last year we got to an NFL alumni league, and we won that and went to the Super Bowl of all of the 20 guys who won. We didn't win that one, but we won that. Then at work we have a bunch of guys who get together, and some girls, into a fantasy football league. So I've been doing that for about probably 3 years now, but before that I never got into it.
Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I got one more question. As you look around the league now, is there any players out there that you say that really remind you of you? Like, is there like another sort of Ken Dilger out there?
The game has changed so much. It's more of a passing game to the tight ends, and those guys are so athletic now. Like Kittle from San Francisco, he's just a beast. Andrews from Baltimore does a good job. Travis Kelce. I think in my mind, in the last probably 20 years, he and Tony Gonzalez were probably the top two tight ends I've seen come along. But it doesn't say that there hasn't been other guys. Witten from Dallas has done a great job for a long, long time, and his longevity has done a great job. But to say is there one that kind of reminds me of me? It's hard to say, because I was such a fan of blocking. I enjoyed blocking. I know there's some tight ends out there that just block, but I think it's such a specialized league now in the tight end position. Not to say that Kelce or a Greg Olsen or Kittle doesn't block. It's just more of they're out there to catch balls, and they do a great job at it.
Kevin, you had one last one?
Well, it's not football related or anything like that, but one of my buddies has family up in Indiana, and he was like, "You gotta ask him about the banana bread." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm telling you, they have amazing banana bread up there." Okay.
Well, my wife actually makes it. She started this little side banana baking business about probably 4 or 5 years ago. And for 20 years before that, she would make a loaf for, the holidays or whatever to have around. and some friends of ours said that, hey, you got to start selling this, and she kind of put it off for a couple of years. So yeah, we've been selling it at retail for about 3 or 4 years now, and she's down there, right now baking some stuff for some orders tomorrow. So it's fun. She's been all over the place locally with the media and stuff, and now it's more become, hey, that's Heidi's husband instead of the vice versa. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get
That's
you out of
awesome.
here on this last question. You mentioned the NFL and the tight ends, much more pass happy league. This year, running actually is up a little bit. Do you see it ever going back to the way it was, and those blocking tight ends really being needed?
Well, I think the running plays that they've done, they've kind of gotten away from the fullback. I think this year the passing may be down just a little bit, just because of what hasn't happened with the preseason, with all the COVID, all the timing routes with the tight ends and the quarterbacks. I can't think of how many quarterbacks have switched teams. You got Tom Brady, you've got the New England quarterback Newton, you've got Bridgewater in Carolina, you've got new ones all across the league now. So maybe that has kind of played a part into the running game, and a lot of injuries have come with guys running around the corner. So it's one of those league years that may change, but eventually it'll get back to the pass happy game again.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate that. It was an honor to have you here. You are our first
Absolutely.
sports guest that we've had. I mean, I had my science teacher on once from high school, but you're the only other guest. So
Fun.
we really thank you for coming out. We want to thank everyone for watching. Reminder to check out ngscsports.com and Arena Eats. Log on to the website, arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience at your favorite sports venue. Arena Eats mobile app pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? So we will see everyone on October 16th, special start time 9:30. Hopefully Facebook Live will be working that night. We'll see. And that's for with Wimbledon and French Open winner Jonathan Stark for the greatest tennis rivalries. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank
Ken,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Good night.
Thanks, Ken.
God bless.